And settle in. You don't need to concentrate. You don't need to follow anything perfectly. Nothing here requires effort. You are not here to improve yourself. You're here to stand down. Because the noise that you carry, the constant checking, adjusting, anticipating, that is not who you are. That is what you have been running. And you can stop running now. Just notice the weight of your body where it rests, the contact points, the places that are already supported. You don't have to hold yourself up in this moment. Your breath doesn't need to be controlled. It knows what to do without you interfering. And as you allow it to move in its own rhythm, something subtle begins to happen. The part of you that is always scanning, always evaluating how you're coming across, how you sound, how you appear, that part can rest. You are not being watched, you're not being judged, you're not required to perform. There is nowhere you need to get to. And when there's nothing to reach for, the system begins to release. The shoulders no longer carry expectation. The jaw no longer holds readiness. The chest no longer braces for response. Not because you force it, but because there's nothing left to defend against. Notice the space that appears when effort drops away. That quiet beneath the thinking. That stillness beneath the personality. This is not relaxation as an exercise, this is absence of pressure. When pressure is gone, what remains is clarity. You don't have to try to be calm, you're simply no longer pushing. Let the outside world fade into the background. Not by blocking it out, but by no longer prioritizing it. Right now, nothing is required of you. There is no right response, no better way to be, no version of you that needs to be maintained. You're allowed to be unconstructed here. And the more you give yourself permission to stop managing, the more your mind begins to simplify. Thoughts become fewer. The internal commentary grows quieter. The urge to monitor yourself loosens its grip. You may notice moments of stillness between thoughts, gaps, pauses. Don't fill them. Those spaces are not emptiness, they are presence. This is the state where change becomes effortless. Not because you are trying to change, but because the system is no longer resisting. You are not preparing for anything, you are not rehearsing, you are not performing, you are simply here. And in this state, nothing needs to be added. Nothing needs to be removed. Because what you are touching now is the part of you that doesn't hesitate, doesn't second guess, doesn't overthink. It doesn't speak yet. It doesn't act yet. It simply exists without friction. Stay here for a moment, not waiting, not expecting, just resting in the absence of pressure. This is the ground. Everything that follows will rise from here. Not through effort, but through alignment. Now that the noise has settled, we can address what has been running beneath the surface all along. Not your words, not your voice, but the image you carry of who you are when you speak. Because you never speak from your skills, you always speak from your self-image. And whatever you believe yourself to be, your system works tirelessly to prove it's true. If you see yourself as someone who must think carefully, check each sentence, monitor how you sound, your mind will create hesitation. Not as a problem, but as confirmation of identity. Not because something is wrong with you, but because your system is loyal to who you believe you are. So we don't just correct behavior, we update identity. Not through effort, but through recognition. There is a deeper part of you, older than habits, older than fear, that already knows how to move cleanly. You felt it before. In moments where there was no audience, no pressure, no self-monitoring, where decisions were simple, where action happened without commentary. That wasn't confidence, that was alignment. That is who you are when nothing interferes. So let this land. You are not someone who tries to speak well. You are someone whose thoughts arrive complete. You are not a processor, you are a chooser. You do not assemble your words, you release them. There's a difference. One comes from control, the other comes from identity. And your system understands identity immediately. You may notice a subtle internal shift as you accept this. Not excitement, not emotion, just inevitability. As if something clicks into place and says, yes, that is accurate. Because at your core, you are not hesitant. You are not fragmented. You are not uncertain. Hesitation was learned. Self-monitoring was learned. Over-control was learned. And anything learned can be unlearned. Not through struggle, but through replacement. From this moment forward, the image updates. You are someone who moves first internally. You choose before you analyze. You speak from certainty, not from permission. Not because you force yourself to, but because that is who you now recognize yourself to be. And when identity changes, Behavior follows automatically. Your mind no longer asks, is this right? Does this sound okay? What will they think? Those questions belong to the old model. The new model is simpler. You know, you decide, you express. Clean, direct, uncomplicated. You do not need more confidence. Confidence is a side effect. You do not need control. Control is compensation. You operate from coherence. Thought and expression are no longer separate events, they are one movement. And as this identity settles, your nervous system adjusts to match it. Breath becomes deeper. Posture becomes natural. The voice carries weight without effort. Not because you're trying to be powerful, but because power is what remains when doubt is absent. You may notice the mind becoming quieter again, but this time not empty, organized. Decisions feel simple. Words feel close to the surface. There's less distance between intention and action. This is not something you have to maintain. Your system is designed to express who you believe you are. And now, you believe something truer. Stay with that. Not repeating it, not reinforcing it, just allowing it to become normal. Because from here on, you do not practice being this way, you are this way. Notice what happens now when you no longer question who you are. There's less movement inside, fewer internal negotiations, less commentary. And in that quiet, something natural begins to emerge. Flow. Not effort, not control, not trying to speak well. Flow is what happens when nothing blocks the signal. Most hesitation is not uncertainty, it's interruption. Thought begins, and before it can move forward, another part steps in to check it, shape it, approve it. That's where the pauses come from. Not lack of intelligence, not lack of words, but too many hands on the wheel. So now we remove the middleman. You don't need to supervise your thoughts. They already know where they are going. And the moment you stop interfering, they begin to move on their own. As you notice the feeling of a thought forming, not as something you must construct, but as something that simply appears, fully shaped, ready. You don't pull it out, you allow it through. There's no preparation phase, no internal rehearsal, no silent editing. The mind speaks the way the body moves, directly, without commentary. And because there's no interruption, there's no need for placeholders. No 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 like, no you know, no stalling for time. Time is no longer required. Speech is no longer something you produce, it's something that passes through you. You may notice how natural this feels, how familiar. This is not a new skill, this is the original state before you learnt to monitor yourself. This is how children speak, how leaders speak, how people speak when they are not performing. Direct, continuous, alive. And as this flow becomes normal to you, you may sense a quiet confidence underneath it. Not excitement, not force, stability. Because when thought and speech are one movement, there's nothing to catch on. No gaps, no friction, no hesitation. Even silence becomes intentional. You pause because you choose to, not because your mind is searching. Your words arrive whole. Your voice follows them naturally. There's nothing to fix, nothing to adjust. This is not a technique, it is a state of operation. And states once learned become automatic. You will notice it first in simple moments. Speaking to someone casually, responding without thinking about how you sound, allowing the first clear thought to move forward. And each time that happens, the system reinforces itself because the body recognizes what works. Flow feels better than control. Clarity feels better than caution. Presence feels better than performance. So your nervous system chooses it without you asking. You don't eliminate hesitation, you make it unnecessary. And when something becomes unnecessary, it disappears on its own. Stay with this for a moment. Notice how simple of an idea it is. When nothing stands between intention and expression. This is how you operate now. And now that your speech moves without friction, something deeper begins to emerge. Not volume, not dominance, weight. Because power is not something you project, it's something that is felt when nothing is uncertain. When you no longer search for words, when you no longer check yourself, when your thoughts move cleanly into sound. Your voice changes on its own. Not by technique, by alignment. There is less urgency in you now. Less need to convince. Less need to fill space. And in that absence of need, others feel you more. Because people don't respond to effort. They respond to coherence. When somebody speaks without hesitation, without apology, without internal noise, their words land differently. Not because they are louder, but because they are undivided. There is no split between what you think and what you express, no gap between intention and delivery, no trace of doubt carried in the tone. And that creates gravity. You may notice it in your body first. Your posture settles without adjustment. Your breath deepens without instruction. Your jaw relaxes while your voice grows steadier. Not rigid, not tense, anchored. You're not trying to sound powerful. Power is what remains when self-monitoring is gone. You're not trying to lead. Leadership is what appears when there's no inner conflict. When you speak from this place, people listen differently. Not because you demand attention, but because your voice does not ask for permission. There is a subtle message beneath every word now. I am here. I am certain. I am not negotiating with myself. That is presence. You are no longer performing communication, you are inhabiting it. Silence becomes part of your authority. Pauses become intentional. Stillness becomes felt. Nothing rushes, nothing strains. You choose when to speak, and when you do, it lands. This is the difference between sounding confident and being unmistakable. And because this state comes from alignment, not effort, it does not drain you. It does not require maintenance. It is restful, sustainable, natural. You are not on, you are simply centered. And from a centered person, power radiates without announcement. This is not an act, this is your baseline now. And everything you've allowed to shift is not meant to stay here in stillness. It's designed to move with you into conversation, into decision, into presence with other people. Because change that only exists in quiet moments is not change. So now your system begins to recognize something new. When you speak, you do not prepare. When you respond, you do not search. When you are addressed, your words arrive without delay. Not because you're trying to apply anything, but because this is now the default state. You no longer ask yourself how you sound. You no longer monitor each phrase. Those habits belong to an identity that no longer exists. The new pattern is simple. You hear, you know, and you speak. And it happens before doubt has had time to form. You may notice this first. In small, ordinary moments, a question asked casually, a comment made without rehearsal, a response that comes cleanly, without filler. And you notice that it feels right. And your system does what it is designed to do. It reinforces what feels aligned. And the more you speak this way, the more natural it becomes. And the more you speak this way, the more natural it becomes. not through repetition, but through identity. Because you are not practicing a skill, you're expressing who you are. Even in pressure, even when the moment matters, even when attention is on you, there is no return to over-control. Not because you resist it, but because there's nowhere for it to attach. There's no internal argument anymore. No need to buy time with sound. Silence becomes choice. Speech becomes movement. Presence becomes stable. And the world begins to reflect it back to you. People respond to the way you speak differently now. Not because you changed volume, but because you removed hesitation. You will feel it in how conversations settle around you, and how your words are received, and how people respond to you, and how little you need to say to be understood. And you don't take pride in it, you don't analyze it, it's simply normal. And it's not something you maintain, it maintains itself, because your nervous system now recognizes clarity as home. There's nothing to remember, nothing to do tomorrow. You don't return to this state, you continue from it. And if you ever notice the old pattern trying to repair, there's no need to fight it, you don't correct it, you don't manage it, you simply speak. And the system realigns on its own. Because what you are now doesn't hesitate. Not out of force, not out of confidence, but out of coherence. This is how you move through the world now. Clear, present, undivided.